welcome to Creative Vitality Jam Sessions. Here we have intimate conversations with extraordinary dance and theater artists about reimagining creativity and supporting and building community. CVJS and I walk in solidarity and as allies for equality, justice, and respect. Black Lives Matter. And please get out and vote. It's less than 2 weeks away. I'm Helen Pickett, and today's guest is Ramon Flowers. He is an assistant professor of dance at Butler University, and he was a Broadway star and a colleague of mine in Frankfurt Ballet. We have known each other since 1991. Ramon is an extraordinary artist who has spanned the world and the genres. Hello, Ramon, welcome.
Hello, Helen.
It's so good to see you. It's so funny. Every time I have, one of our Frankfurt family on, I feel like no time has passed. And, there was such a bond that we just stepped back into, the friendship and the colleagueship that we had. It's always so nice.
Yes, I feel exactly the same, and you look exactly the same. Look at you.
Oh, well, thank you. You've always been very kind. So the first answer for everybody. First of all, I want to say you look fantastic too.
Oh, thank you.
You do. I mean, I know it's after the fact and it was like weird, but you really do. You always look beautiful. So
at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning.
Right? I know. So where are you in the world?
I am in Indianapolis, Indiana. Yes,
Midwest. And that's a recent move, right? You lived in New York for years.
I did. I lived in New York for 16 years after moving back from Europe by way of Canada. I went to Canada for a year and then
right.
New York. Yeah.
We'll get to that because you have an amazing trajectory in your career that I can't wait to talk about. But I'm going to start with this. It actually starts with recognizing your amazing career. You were a principal dancer with Maurice Béjart, William Forsythe, and Nacho Duato. Went on to dance with Les Grands Ballets Canadiens de Montreal. Not to mention you were the first African-American man in Pennsylvania Ballet, and you were offered contracts in multiple companies. And this is just your professional ballet career. Please share with us your vision. And what I mean by that is, I use the word vision because you could not have had the career you had without this intense focus, this kind of laser focus, this intention, which is a word I really like to work with. How did you find or hone, manifest this intention for first of all, your ballet career? We'll get on to the rest later.
Yeah, well, it kind of started for me when I realized I had this innate ability to dance, but it was late. I went to undergrad originally at Glassboro State College, and I majored in theater. My major was speech theater communication, and I had to take movement for the actor. That's where I discovered I was a dancer. But one of my teachers, she danced on Broadway, Diane Hall. She was a Fosse dancer, and that's where I kind of got the love for Broadway. She wanted to use me in her company, but she said I needed to clean up my line. I didn't know what she was talking about, but she said, you need to take some ballet. I took my first ballet class at 18 and just fell in love with it. I think it was the challenge of it because everything else seemed to come naturally, but ballet, there was this challenge. And then once I started and fell in love with it and started to improve, I got to this place where, I felt like I needed to catch up, first of all. So that's where that focus came in, that laser focus. It's like I have to make up for all that lost time. And I kept thinking, just imagine if I started at the age that most people do, where I'd be right now with all that I've achieved in such a short period of time. So that was the focus that made me so diligent about working as hard as I did to sort of catch up. The other thing was that I'm sort of a rebel with a cause, in that when I got to a place where I was good enough to start auditioning for companies, I was put in a black box where it was like, there was Dance Theater of Harlem and Alvin Ailey. And I was asked, literally, are you gonna audition for Dance Theater of Harlem or Alvin Ailey? And at that point, I realized, you know what? I'm gonna prove the system wrong and let everyone know that you will not define me. I'm gonna define myself, and I'm gonna dance for every company except for those two. And that's where that focus and that drive sort of came from, you know, just like working as hard as I could to, first of all, catch up. Then I realized also something that had been instilled in me as a child, you know, African-American, Latino child, that I always had to work twice as hard to unfortunately get half as much. So that was that drive. It's like, you know, I have to, you know, work twice as hard as everyone else. And now I'm going to prove that I can go wherever I want to go. And it has nothing to do with the color of my skin.
That's right. And look what you did. I mean, it's, you really manifested, you know, there is something to a drive of, you know, like let's just say, because you started late, that drive in and of itself, you know, besides the pushback and saying, I will not be boxed in, incredible fire and energy behind those very no's, if you will, you know, these no's that are presented, you know, and you're saying, oh, those no's, I'm going to erase those no's and I'm going to have and manifest the life that I want. Yeah, amazing. It takes a lot of courage as well.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. In all your reimaginings throughout your ballet career, including the vast repertoire you have danced and the creators you've worked with, because you worked with, I mean, the three I mentioned, they're living choreographers. You had things made on you for the majority of your career. That in and of itself is also really something that not every ballet dancer gets to experience. You know, not just one-fold, but threefold. What were the key turning points for you as an artist within this milieu of, you know, this vertiginous milieu of constant creation? And how did the choreographers and choreography shift your lens?
Okay, so I guess some of the turning points started with not really understanding who I was as an artist, and then working with those living choreographers and having them extract from what they saw or what they discovered through and with me. So for example, with William Forsythe, I realized that I was comfortable before I started working with him. I was comfortable being a muse, like being told what to do, like, and imitating. I was a great imitator. You showed me a step, I could imitate it, you know. And so working with Billy, I finally had to discover me. He pushed me to show myself on stage. At one point he came to me and he said, you know, when I look at you on stage, I see myself. I want to see you. And I was confused. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you know, I show you something and you just pick it up and you just like, but I want to see you. Like, how do you show me who you are? And I went to Anthony Rizzi, to ask him to help me with that, because I really didn't know, because I was so used to being told what to do. That's what classical ballet does to you. It just puts you in this box and you have to be exactly how they want you to be. And for the first time in my life, I was being asked to be me, and I didn't know what that meant. So it was a discovery. It was a wonderful discovery. And you know, through it, I feel like I became the artist that I eventually became. And it also made it difficult to go other places afterwards because working
Yeah.
with Nacho Duato after that, he wanted to put me back in a box. And I was just like, oh no, you know, I had too much freedom with William Forsythe. There's no way I can go back in that box.
Yeah.
And so that was another discovery for me. Yeah, and working with Maurice Béjart, he also pulled out a side of me that I didn't know I had. I felt that I was this like, you know, like energetic, bravura, technical sort of dancer, but he found in me this sort of melancholic, um, you know, dramatic, all of these, he gave me and created such amazing roles that I would have never dreamed of even asking for or, you know, striving to do. And, but through them, I discovered another aspect of who I was as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, you could actually through what Maurice Béjart gave you is you kind of went back to what you had studied in the beginning, right? The acting and this drama that you had started with before you even fell into that first dance class.
Exactly.
So I'm always amazed about the circle, you know, of how, you know, you say that and of course you did, you know, there were different aspects that you had to discover yourself with Bill, but you were ready for that. That's something I also like to remind people about and the show who are watching, if they're younger people, that we are the sum of our lives. You were ready for that point to go, you know, and like, oh, this is the Ramon I didn't know existed, or the freedom of dance where I get to be like the choice maker, you know, if you will, you know, I get to make my choices. And so your past work had readied you for that, I believe. Do you think that's right?
Oh, totally. Yes. All of my life experiences combined with my the research and all of the information that I got through my training, all of that combined, and that was one of the reasons that I actually wanted to do speech theater communication when I went to college, because I sang as a child. I never studied, but I just wanted to be a singer. I had this natural voice. And but then there was Michael Jackson, and I was so much like him that I was like, okay, well, they don't need another one. So I discovered acting in high school and dance in college, and then I thought musical theater, because that combines all of it. And so basically, what you're saying is yes, I thought of that, like to hone in on the dance, because that was the last thing and the least amount of experience that I had at the time. But once I realized that dance was the thing that was going to open the door, I thought, I have all those other things, and when I need to reach in my toolbox to bring them out, I'll have them, but I'm going to focus on the thing that's going to open the door for me, and that's dance, because I knew that that was my, like, you know, when you find that thing that's your innate ability, and you see the reactions of people when you're doing it, and also how I felt doing it, I realized this is going to be my moneymaker. So I need to really hone in on this craft, and that's going to be the one that will allow me to do all the other things that I have in my toolbox.
When I hear you speak, I'm reminded of something that I made a decision really early on, and then at different points in my life, right? Take the excuses away. So you cannot say, or someone cannot say to you, you're not this, you're not this. You're like, well, I am this, I am this, I did this. And it's, you know, the toolbox, as you say. And the other thing I just want to piggyback on is, you said, you know, ballet does this. It puts us in a box. But Ramon, you and I, many of our colleagues, we are working now, our generation, I feel like many of us are trying to work to say ballet doesn't have to be that.
Exactly.
Ballet doesn't have to be that. The beautiful technique of ballet, that's gold, right? And we can move forward with ballet with how we know and how we've experienced it. So
Absolutely.
now on to Broadway. You were featured in many Broadway shows, including the role of Richie in a chorus line, and you wrote, musical theater was your first love. I have a strong sense that you found out at a very young age that you were in charge of your life. We're speaking a bit to this, and that life was a series of decisions. So my first question, is that true? And you've spoken about that, but was it early on that you already discovered that?
I think it was. I don't think I tapped into it until later, but I realized it at a very young age that we can manifest what we want by the power of positive thinking. I just started doing it and realized, like, hey, it was later that I started to get all these things, and people would sort of mention, hey, you just seem to be jumping from Broadway show to Broadway show, and they didn't see the work or the auditions or the rejection, if you want to look at it like that. You know, all of the times that I wouldn't get the job, they only saw the benefits of all of my work and my positive thinking. And for me, it's always been, I've put it out there, but I don't just sit around and wait for it. I put it out there, I do the work, but I know that it's going to happen because it's always happened, and I can't see any reason why it wouldn't happen. And that's exactly how it was with everything that I've ever done. I mean, I just kind of said, you know, it wasn't just like, oh, I want to work with, you know, Balanchine, or I want to work with William Forsythe of Béjar. I did say those things, and then I put it out there and I did the work. The only time it didn't work was with Mr. B because he died. But I was offered a contract with the New York City Ballet, and I turned it down for reasons of tokenism. And we can go into that later if you'd like, or I can go into it now.
You can go into it now.
Okay, so yeah, we spoke briefly about it in that reunion and the conversation at the Mob Ballet.
Yeah.
Where Billy,
shout out to Teresa.
Yes, yeah. William Forsythe, I didn't know who he was at the time, but I was approached by Peter Martins to join the New York City Ballet for the American Music Festival because Paul Taylor and William Forsythe were creating ballets for that particular festival. And he approached me by saying, well, you know, William Forsythe is doing this sort of jazzy, funky ballet, and we need someone like you with a, you know, jazzy, funky approach to ballet, but also with the, you know, classical line. And Mel Tomlinson is leaving. Mel Tomlinson was
I know. Dancer. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
And I hate to look at it like this, but at the time, New York City Ballet had this issue, as far as I'm concerned, with tokenism. Arthur Mitchell was the first. Then there was Mel, who eventually ended up doing a lot of Arthur Mitchell's roles. And the question I had for Peter when he let me know that Mel was leaving, because that was sort of like the punctuation on the offer. It's like, and Mel is leaving. I'm like, oh, so is that the real reason that you'd like to hire me, or am I talented enough to be in the company? So my question was, because I would have had this question in my mind had I joined the company, and I know that other dancers would probably either think or have the same questions in their minds. It was like, so after this American Music Festival, and I've done the William Forsythe and Paul Taylor piece, how do I fit in the company? And he said, well, you know, you with seniority, you'd have to wait your turn, but eventually you'd be doing Mel's roles. And that was just like the wrong thing for him to say, because that helped me make up my mind. I was like, oh, okay, so I see. I'm being tokenized, I'm being put in a black box. And I would have joined the company thinking constantly, if I were not Black at the time that they needed another Black token, would I be in the company right now? Am I good enough to be here? Or is it just because I just happened to be that token that was in the right place at the right time?
And I venture to say, I'm going to shift it a little because first of all, I have to go back a little bit because you and I are both very positive. Like when I heard you speaking about you put it out there and you do the work, I felt like the same words have come out of my mouth for my entire life. So like, so right there with you. I'm going to say, of course you were talented enough. Of course you were. The problem was his.
Oh yeah.
Not yours. And you know that, but like the tokenism was there, but it was the box that he was in.
Yes.
That limitation, you know, because, but unfortunately, as we are as artists, you would have always questioned yourself.
Exactly.
But
Yes.
I know you as a dancer, and the
And now
question,
I know myself as a
yeah,
dancer, thanks to wonderful people like William Forsythe and Maurice Bijar, and even Nacho Duato. Even though my time with him was limited, I learned a lot of what I didn't want while
yeah,
working. You know,
yeah, which is important too.
yes, definitely, because I respect him. I love his work from a distance. It's just not for me.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
So the other, there was I have a strong sense. Oh yeah, the other part of that question was, and I think you actually spoke about this a little earlier. Um, did some of this so going back to, you know, the series of decisions and life decisions, you mentioned briefly that, you know, this was also something from your family. So did you feel like this early on from your family and this support, and was this positive way a part of your upbringing?
Actually, no. I mean, sadly enough, it wasn't necessarily. I mean, part of it was in that it was instilled in me that I had to work twice as hard,
Okay,
half as much. So
right.
that aspect of it came from my family. That focus, that drive of making sure that I needed to do what I needed to do to get to where I ended up.
Yeah.
So yes, I guess in a sense you could say that. But as far as the support with my decision to become a performer, that wasn't necessarily encouraged nor discouraged, but the majority of it came from me. I mean, the fire was in me, but combined with, you know, I guess the motto for the the person of color in
Mm.
America.
How did this positive approach, and how did it sprout? Who, you know, how did this come to you? How did you discover it? Did somebody have an influence on this, you know, power of positive thinking, or is this something you discovered solely on your own?
I'd say that I discovered it solely on my own. After living it, I later realized that it was a thing because I just did it and things manifest. But I started later hearing about like The Secret, you know, that book,
Okay.
and hearing people talk about this stuff, and I'm like, that's not a secret. I've been living that my whole life. And you know, and I read the book, and then I just thought, yeah, I mean, it's true because I'm living proof. But then I'd often wonder, like, why doesn't it work for other people who seem to struggle? Because there were people who often came to me saying, oh my God, I've been auditioning for Broadway forever. I've lived in New York. I'm struggling. I'm starving. And you just come to town and you're just like booking all the shows. But maybe they're not thinking positively. Maybe they're putting the wrong stuff out there. I don't know because I didn't ask. I tend to avoid negativity. Like when there's someone who's constantly bickering and complaining, I think it's contagious, and I either put my headset in, and I've done shows where people are like, oh, I really hate being here. I hate this, I hate that. And I'm like, gotta go. I've always been that person who can try to find the positive in almost everything. And I also will take myself out of a situation once I've realized, okay, I've done everything that I could possibly do to make this the best situation for everyone involved. And it's not going to get any better. It's time for me to go. And that's why my resume is as extensive as it is. It's not so much that I was like, oh, I want a resume that looks like this. It was mainly because, okay, first of all, there was the desire to work with those people. But when I've worked with whomever I ended up working with, I would get to a place where I wasn't being satisfied any longer. And that was nothing against anyone. It's just that we come to a place and a time, I don't know if it's always going to happen, but throughout my life experience up until now, you know, it's like things run their course and you have to just understand that that's life and not have any hard feelings about whatever that might be, especially if you get to a place where it's like, okay, artistically, I'm not growing anymore. I'm not being satisfied, or I'm very unhappy. You know, it's like, that's when I think we have to start to think about how we reinvent something.
Yeah, but also, Ramon, when I hear you speak, you know, there is, and I know of what you speak, right? Artists of a certain age, we do, but I have to also say a tremendous amount of courage to know, to feel it and know when it's time to leave, you know, and you know, there's a bit of the overstaying, and then there's one last push. It's like, I'm out of here, but it's really, you know, it's quite courageous because each new step is also an uprooting. But the thing about that is like, in hearing you speak, I just shifted my thought a bit too. Like, it's an uprooting, but those are fertile, ready little roots to go into something else. It's not that they're going to die. You're taking care of those roots because you're leaving. Yes. You're letting yourself thrive. And that takes courage, but it takes a shift in thought that it's not scary, scary, scary. It's opportunity, opportunity, opportunity.
Amen. Yes,
you know?
That's exactly it. And, you know, and I think you're absolutely, I mean, not I think, I know you're absolutely right. It takes courage. And each time that I've done that, I was, you're afraid. Yeah. But the courage and the confidence to do it came from that power of positive thinking and knowing that when I've put the right stuff out there, it came back to me just exactly how I wanted it to. And so that's the thing that, although it took courage, there was that sort of confidence in knowing that I'm going to be okay.
And don't you think, I say this also, that, you know, the first time's always the scariest. So once you've made that, for example, that big move to Europe, I moved over there at 19. You know, that's the first, like, those first big steps, like the first big time, you know, the scariest time. Well, when you know you do that step, you know that, okay, I've done it before.
Yes.
So it's almost like, you know, training our young ones to make that first big step sooner, whatever it means. So, you know, like you said, there's that knowing in you.
Yes, exactly. And I think of it, I like to think of the metaphor of the mother bird pushing the birds out of the nest. Like, she knows, she has the confidence that they're going to flap their wings and fly. I mean, there's one or two that may not make it, but that's life. And when you think of all the people, similar to what I just said about the ones who said they were in New York for years and they never got their Broadway show, and I just kind of, you know, not everyone, for whatever reason, maybe because they're putting the wrong information out there, or they weren't really prepared to make that leap, or they're not really making the leap. They're probably like hesitating. You know, you can't half step. You have to take the full jump or you're not going to make it. You know what I mean? And then maybe that's it. That's probably the answer. You can't hesitate.
You can, as long as you need to, but eventually that step's going to be taken or not.
Right. When you're ready to take the step, you can't go like, okay, I'm going to partially. That's
Yeah.
what I mean by the hesitation. Like, yeah, you hesitate to be sure that, okay, now it's time to take that leap. But once you decide I'm taking this leap, you have to give your everything and go.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
kind of, I always equate it to, like, you know, when you go to a PK arabesque and you step under yourself and you're all shaky and wobbly, but when you step out, it's like, I don't know why, but it works every time.
that's it. That's the perfect metaphor. It's similar to what I'm thinking about, like taking that leap. Because if you're jumping from here to here, if you half step, guess where you're going to land? But you have to give it everything to get there. Same with the PK arabesque. You can't like half step to get there. You're halfway in between. You have to get, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great metaphor for all those dancers out there.
We're very simpatico in how we've approached, also how we've gone forward and approached our lives. So many parallels in the thinking and the dogged determination, which I'm using that word on purpose because it's about the work.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never minded the work. I mean, sometimes I've been like, really? But, you know, I find in these times in COVID, I've had to reinvent again. And I'm doing work that I did in New York when I was, you know, pursuing acting. You know, I sending 100 resumes out. And remember the Ross reports?
Oh, yes.
That said, don't phone, don't drop in, right? Well, because of our work with Bill and because of, you know, this work, I phoned and dropped into every single one. In 100 people, only 2 people were rude. So again, it's that rebellious nature. As long as you're not hurting anybody or yourself, yeah, some rules are written down for the majority to follow the rules. But then how do you get those Broadway shows? Well, there are, anyhow, it's similar thinking. It's,
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Because I did the same thing with not having an agent when I was in. I had one at one point. I let her go. But bottom line, I kind of got a name for myself and doing the thing that you just mentioned with the don't phone, don't drop in kind of thing. I'd hear about an audition and I'd crash it. I'm like, I don't have an agent, but I can guarantee you that once you see me, you'll be happy I showed up.
that's right. That's right.
Yes.
Because you could deliver.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like based on reading the breakdown, I knew that I was what they were looking for. And I was
exactly.
helping someone in casting do their job.
Exactly.
Alexa, pause. Alexa, pause.
I was like, who are you talking to? That I got it, Alexa. Okay. So, and to continue the reimagining, yeah, because your life is full of reimagining, beautiful reimagining. You are now an assistant professor or associate, assistant or associate,
Yes.
assistant professor at Butler University. You earned your BA in French with a Spanish minor, an MFA from the University of Iowa. Your students are so lucky to have a professor with so much professional knowledge and life experience. Really, your students are extraordinarily lucky. What do you find the most important knowledge you can impart to your students? So this is a big amorphous question. I know there's tons of important knowledge, but it's similar to a later question I'm going to ask you. It can be vast, but at this moment, what is that really nugget of knowledge that you can give your students right now to carry forward, to practice, you know, to practice art?
Yeah. Well, what I tend to remind my students, especially when it comes to the dance technique classes that I teach, they're focusing with almost all their other professors on honing in the technique. And with me, I remind them that it's called dance. Although it's ballet, it's under the umbrella of dance. It's about performing. So they come in and they have this rigid approach because they're diligent about the work. And I said, yes, it's work, but don't forget that it's dance. So let's make the work dance. Enjoy what you're doing first and foremost. Like in my class, you have permission to enjoy. For the balcony across the street, I want to see you dance. And so I think that's the most valuable piece of information I can give them, because I remember being them where it was like, you're so like wrapped up in the work that everything is just so rigid. And when you're asked to move finally, you can't, because you've been so confined in this ideology of perfection,
which
that
doesn't exist.
yeah. And so they tend to forget to dance. And then and you know, and I see them loosen up, and I give them little pointers on how and what they can do to make it a little more expressive. So I'll give them a combination. I'm like, okay, so that was the dress rehearsal. This is the performance. And then I show them what they can do to elevate what they just did to make it, you know, project to the balcony across the street. So that's one amongst many things that I impart. But I think that's a very important one because, yeah, I mean, there's some really amazing students that we have here at Butler, but, you know, I often, when I'm teaching them for the first time, I notice that there might be one or two that just come in to my class and they're just living. But the others, I'm like, okay.
And you know, we all need to be taught various things in our life, you know, and you are the voice of teaching them that, well, first of all, the enjoyment, the personal enjoyment of, I also say, living and, you know, discovering all that's in your body and expressive, and how many ways you can express. But it's also, let's not forget, it's what the audience, it's what makes the audience sit forward when they can feel through you, because that's what performing arts people go to have another life, or to have a fantasy life, or have a moment of that kind of feeling, especially with dance. You know how it can land on the, it can break the fourth wall, and you are that voice. You're telling them, this is what you can experience, you know. And I just get thrilled thinking about it, because it's probably why you and I have stayed in this profession our entire lives. We know, even in my, you know, advanced years, that thrill of what it feels like. And that is your voice. You are giving this to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing I like to remind them is that, you know, they have to start thinking about these things now. Like, rather than waiting until they get to the audition or until they're on the stage, it's like, I give you permission to start thinking about it, even if you feel ridiculous. Feel ridiculous. It's better to start feeling ridiculous now, rather, if you feel ridiculous. You may not, hopefully you don't. But, you know, if that's something you need to work through it in my class, you know, so that by the time you get to that audition and there are like 25 girls or men who look, women or men who look just like you as far as body type and technique, there's going to be that one thing about you that's going to make everyone behind that table go like, ooh. Yeah.
Beautiful. Like so many artists, Ramon, you know, like so many artists I know, including myself, you keep embarking on new avenues. What do you think it is about artists that we continue to find new ways to open, that we keep the search going?
I would say it's the love of what we do. And with that, you know, there's that exploration. And as artists, I don't want to say we're never satisfied, because I'm satisfied with everything that I do, but you constantly want to improve upon everything. And so we do the research internally and externally to, you know, keep the music playing. That's what keeps it interesting and enjoyable for us and either our audience or our students. Yeah,
Yeah.
it keeps you from getting stale, if
Mm.
you will.
Yeah. The need is there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we are on to the 3 questions that everybody gets asked. Can you share? I know that you have many, and I'm sure you do. Can you share a favorite or impactful memory or memories, if there are more than one, from your creative life?
Yes, I would say, yes, it's more difficult when you do have many, but if I were to think of one, it would probably be learning to get up after I fell for the first time on stage. And all that that meant, because there's a lot in that. I just made it kind of like a blanket comment, but what I discovered in that was that you fall and it's a second. Although for you on that stage, it feels like you're on that floor forever. And you start creating all of these scenarios about the audience, but you realize later that it was just a second. And if I let go of that second rather than dwelling upon it for the rest of the ballet, no one would have noticed. They probably would have thought, well, did he fall?
Yeah.
Because I realized I was on the floor and up in the speed of light and got back into it physically, but mentally I was still on the floor.
Yeah.
And so what I discovered in that was that you have to, just take that thing and move on. It happened, it's in the past, you can't change it. It was a couple seconds, and chances are no one in the audience, if you move on, most people will probably not even remember that you fell. And I use that in life when I tend to focus on things that are potentially irrelevant or that happen, but I can't do anything about it, but I have to continue with my life. And I've learned and grown just from that one experience. And because it was the first time, and it seemed like it was just like, okay, you fell and it's over, but it haunted me for a year.
Wow.
Because for whatever reason, up until that time, it was like this magical thing would happen when I went on stage. It was like I was in this other place, another world, invincible. Like everything worked. Like even if it didn't work in rehearsal, for whatever reason, the curtain would go up, the lights are on me, the music started, and everything worked. I just felt like, nothing could ever go wrong for whatever reason. It just somehow magically worked until that day. And I'm like, oh, wait, things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And they do. And it did. And for whatever reason, every time I heard that music, because Maurice Béjart, it was in his Firebird, the Firebird. I was doing the lead.
Okay. Wow.
In front of everybody you can imagine. Baryshnikov was there. Al Vanilli was there. The original cast was there from the Paris Opera. It was created on them. Michael Denot. And the worst was that I could see all of them. Because it was in Paris, the Grand Palais, and there was like this dome. So it was glass, and it was, normally it's dark. But because of this glass and it wasn't getting dark outside very quick, that early, by the time the show started, I couldn't get into the piece because normally the spotlight is in my eye, and you know there's that abyss, and you can mentally get into the piece, but I couldn't. I could see people, and I'm looking at their faces, and then when I fell, I'm thinking, oh my God, I fell in front of this one and that one, and I didn't want to do that ballet ever again. It just like I left the theater after that performance. I didn't want to read the reviews, and I literally asked Maurice Béjart to take me out of it. He didn't. He would just look at me working on that thing before every show, and then falling, because I had a mental block. I just continued to fall in that same spot for almost a year.
Wow.
Until I finally said, okay, you know what it's like to fall. Now just don't do it. Because I'd literally prepare to fall so I wouldn't fall on because it's like a double tour. You jump up in the air, you go around, and you had to land sort of over, and it was raped. So it made me fall.
Yes.
But I realized that I had to just go straight up, come straight down, and then incline once I've successfully landed. And I took away all the psychological part. It's like, okay, well, stop preparing to fall. You know you're gonna fall, or not, by just keeping your body up. But it also took away like the fear of the fear that I developed in thinking that I can't achieve this particular thing if I didn't approach it a certain way, if that makes sense. Like I knew the technique of what I needed to do, and I had to take the fear aspect of falling out of it. And I'm sure you've had, most dancers at some point have had this thing where there's something technical, but you psych yourself out by saying, oh, I'm gonna fall, or I'm gonna do this, and you don't make it. But you have those good days, because I remember I used to have good and bad days, either in class or on stage or wherever, and where you'd say, I'm just gonna do this. I'm just throw myself into it. Sort of like what you were saying about the piqué arabesque or the leap of faith that we were talking about earlier. You had to just like go for it. And I was half stepping, and that's why I was falling. So yeah. I learned through that to not half step, to fully give everything to get to the place I wanted to go.
And what a journey, right?
Yes.
Speak about a year. And that's also important for people these days, especially when it's fast, fast, fast. Journeys sometimes take time, and sometimes they're very, you go through the steps quickly. Yeah. In supporting and building a more equitable community, dance community, this is the other giant question that we have to hone in on one aspect. What do you believe needs to be shifted or changed?
I believe that people in general have to become more empathetic to the other side of whatever the inequity is. Because what often tends to happen in my experience is that a lot of times people really just don't know. They don't have the information, or they don't want to know because it doesn't impact them. But I think if they are able to somehow put themselves in the shoes of the people who are suffering or who are not receiving the equity, they might become more empathetic, and change might potentially happen, especially if the empathy is coming from the people in power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Empathy. Yeah, right. Do you have an insight or a daily inspiration that you can share about living a creative life?
Well, I feel completely fulfilled as an artist when I'm in my place of you know, creation and or being created on when I was dancing. And I've often used it as a means of escape, if you will, because of a lot of the pain that I've had throughout my life with, speaking of equity and inequity, just seeing, you know, how unfair certain things had been for certain people in the world. And then there came the time where I realized, hey, as an artist, I also have a voice. I can use that voice to make change while entertaining people. And as a creator, that's what I set out to do. So when I was in grad school, my research was on, you know, diversity and inclusivity and social justice. And that's where I decided to start honing in on that voice and using my creativity to finally be the change or be a part of the change that I always wanted to see as a child. That I thought, well, I'm just one little old person whose voice has pretty much been silenced. Now I feel like I have a voice.
Ramon, it's just been such a pleasure to speak with you today. I always saw it back in Frankfurt too, but you have this incredibly bright light within you. You're a beacon, and you are living a life. You are an example. You are affecting so many people, have affected so many people through your generosity and your sweetness and your kindness and your empathy. And just that's one of the main reasons I love these conversations, you know. So thank you so much for this, such a generous talk today. Really, it's been a joy.
It's a pleasure. I'm happy to have been included in this wonderful forum. So thank you.
Of course, of course. So, you know, do you have a website or a place where people could find out more about your amazing career? I mean, they can just put in your name and I'm sure they could find things, but are you on social media? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I don't have a website yet. I should.
Yeah.
One. I mean, I think I have one somewhere, but I mean, the website. But I am on social media. I'm on Instagram. Ramon Andre Flowers is my handle.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook. Just my name, Ramon Flowers.
Great. Okay. I urge people to look into Ramon. There's a wealth of knowledge and beautiful artistry. So in the description box below this video, you will find a short bio of Ramon. So you can find out a little bit more there. We have 2 exciting new guests every week. Our next guest will be the principal dancer of Pennsylvania Ballet, Jermel Johnson. I want to thank now the amazing dance community that we get to be a part of that has upheld us and given us so much. I want to thank Gracie Spina, who the amazing intern producer of the show, and Ramon. Once again, I want to thank you for a beautiful talk. I hope to see you sooner than later. Keep reimagining creativity, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.